Hey folks, welcome back. So as we continue to look at Elastic Beanstalk, it's important to always keep that DevOps engineer perspective in mind. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about Elastic Beanstalk with RDS. And that seems pretty straightforward, and for the most part, it is pretty straightforward. But as DevOps engineers, there are some intricacies that we need to keep in mind and be aware of as we design our systems. So in the DevOps doctrine, let's go into Elastic Beanstalk with RDS. So Elastic Beanstalk provides support for running RDS instances in your Elastic Beanstalk environment. Well, fair enough, we know that, but let's think about this a little bit. We create our Elastic Beanstalk application, and when we are building our application, we spin up an RDS instance. So our application is tightly coupled to that RD instance. In other words, when we go into Elastic Beanstalk, and if we delete our environment, we will be deleting our RDS database as well. Now, that may be fine. Maybe we're okay with that. We keep backups, we take snapshots, and if we want to recreate our database, we can do that fairly easily. So again, Elastic Beanstalk provides integration with Amazon RDS, and we can add a database instance to our Elastic Beanstalk environment. We can do this with MySQL, PostgreSQL, Oracle, or SQL Server. And we can do this during or after environment creation. So let's check this out. Just to emphasize the point, let's go into Elastic Beanstalk and let's create a new environment. And we'll make it a web server environment. Name our environment. And we'll leave the domain blank. We'll get an auto-generated value. And let's choose a platform, kind of partial to Node.js. We'll just do a sample application and create environment. And this will take a few minutes. Let's say we create our environment, a few weeks go by, maybe a few months. We decide that we want an RDS database. And that's where we have to consider how and where we're going to deploy our RDS database. Is it going to be tightly coupled to our Elastic Beanstalk environment? By tightly coupled, I mean, are we adding an RDS database to our Elastic Beanstalk environment? And if so, what are our mitigation strategies to prevent losing data? Again, if we delete this environment, that tightly coupled database is going to be deleted with it. So, are we keeping backups? Are we taking snapshots? These are the things as DevOps engineers that we have to consider. And this is certainly something that a scenario could arise on the DevOps Pro exam, testing you on these considerations. And just to talk a little bit further about those considerations, and let's say we decide to tightly couple our database with Elastic Beanstalk. We're just adding a database to our Elastic Beanstalk environment. And while I'm talking, our Elastic Beanstalk environment has gone to an OK, ready state. So again, if we're going to tightly couple our database to this environment, that may be perfectly fine for, let's say, a dev or a test environment. But what about a prod environment? Well, we are DevOps engineers. How are we engineering our prod environment? Are we tightly coupling that RDS database to our Elastic Beanstalk environment? Now, it's something you certainly can do, but I would suggest that it is not best practice. Again, because it ties the life cycle of your database instance to the life cycle of your application's environment. All right. Now, again, our environment is ready. And I'll just click on the URL just to verify, okay, we are up and running. Again, let's consider the scenario where we get a couple weeks down the road, a couple months. There's a little bit more to this application than we anticipated. We need a data store. So we're going to go ahead and add an RDS database. So let's go to configuration, and we've seen this page before. Let's go to database and click modify. And basically we're saying, hey, we want to add an RDS database to our environment. We could restore from a snapshot, but we don't have a snapshot. So let's just stay with the defaults: MySQL, engine version, instance class, T2 micro, storage. Let's add a username and password for our database. And note this important point: when you terminate your environment, your database instance is also terminated. It's the whole point of this lesson. Making that decision and knowing the ramifications of that decision. So we have the option to create a snapshot, to save a snapshot of the database prior to termination. So, long story short, of course, we can restore this database. If our environment is terminated, our database instance is terminated and goes away, we can restore it. How long does that take? Do we really want that situation for a prod environment? Probably not. All right, so anyway, let's just click apply. We're changing our environment. Basically, we're adding an RDS database. Tightly coupled, this database is being created in our environment. That may be fine for dev, that may be fine for test or beta, and we have a snapshot. But again, do we want to risk that for a prod environment? The answer is probably not. So what's our solution for a prod environment? Well, we can decouple our RDS database from our Elastic Beanstalk environment. Essentially, we create our Elastic Beanstalk environment, and then for our database, we go into RDS and create our database external to our Elastic Beanstalk environment. So that tight coupling of the two is broken. If our Elastic Beanstalk environment goes away, deletion, accidental deletion, some major event, well, guess what? Our RDS database is still there. So to decouple our database instance from our environment, again, we configure it in RDS. And what we then can do is configure our Elastic Beanstalk application to connect to our RDS database on launch. This also enables us to connect multiple environments to a database and terminate an environment without affecting the database. And we can also perform seamless updates with blue-green deployments. All right, and it's going to take a few minutes for our database to be spun up and ready, but we've seen the process and the main points have been emphasized. This database we are spinning up is tightly coupled to Elastic Beanstalk. It's essentially being spun up in our Elastic Beanstalk environment. That may be good for tests, that may be good for dev. It's probably not how you want to go with a prod environment. In that case, we need to decouple our RDS from Elastic Beanstalk. Now, I'm going to save that part for a hands-on lab. So please join me in the next lesson, and certainly join me in the upcoming lab on Elastic Beanstalk with RDS.